Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another Pallavi Market Research video. Today, we're going to be discussing how different cultures determine truth, what truth is, and how it's determined by a body of people is actually extremely different, dependent on the culture and their set of values. And again, it's not just their stated values, it's their it's how their stated values and how their behavior interacts with one another, right? I think we've talked about this in past videos where we discussed how, in order to be a healthy individual or healthy culture, your values and your behaviors need to integrate. They need to be one with each other. They need to be congruent. If you say one thing and you believe one thing, if you think it's bad to cheat on your wife and you end up cheating on your wife all the time, that's a like that's a mentally unhealthy person, right? So, according to ancient Greeks, there are three different types of cultures. There's a theonomos, which is where truth is determined by God. Heteronomos, where truth is determined by a few, so like an oligarchy or a dictatorship, right? And there's autonomous, where truth is determined by self, by you as an individual. Now, theonomos is very interesting to me because it is where truth is determined by God. And this is essentially where America 1.0 is what I'm kind of calling this example here. Because at the very founding of America, we know and we were taught in school that our founding fathers were extremely anti-church. They were anti-establishment, they were anti-institution, but they were not at all anti-God, and they were actually extremely religious, right? Like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson were both extreme advocates of Christianity, and specifically this idea that each American should be cultivating their own personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think it's really important to sit back and recognize that this was a decision that they made because it's very easy for us to pretend that Christianity is so old and all these things and that America is so old too. But at the end of the day, like these are some of the s- most brilliant minds in all of human history. And they had all of these different cultural, and they were able, when they were founding America, they were able to sort through everything. They were able to do this insane comp test of all the value systems in the world and 1700 years after Christ living, they chose a Christian-based society. And if and all of our laws in America are related to the teachings of Jesus and Christianity, okay? Now, heteronomos. This is where truth is determined by a few, like I was saying earlier. So this is like really easy to understand. Russia, China, right? Most civilizations in history would fall under this category, right? Where because most people, most bodies of people, populations, they seek the great people among them and then they put them into positions of power, right? And this is how strongmen, leaders, dictators, emperors, kings, that's how they begin, right? They usually begin like these kind of dictatorship like situations. They begin because there's chaos and they need a strong man to remedy the chaos, to bring order to the chaos, and then they create this institution of power, and then there are usurpers who people don't actually agree with that take over those people, blah blah blah, right? And that's how tyranny happens, right? But a lot of the best cultures maybe in history, most successful cultures in history, have actually been governed by one dude, right? It's just not a reliable system long term. Now, an autonomous culture is where truth is determined by self. This is America today. And I want to describe this by describing one of my favorite topics that no one's written a book about yet, and hopefully I'm not going to have the one to do it. So maybe one of you could write a book about this. And it's about how different cultures throughout history have valued intelligence, right? And what do I mean by this? So like ancient Egypt, right? They viewed their smartest people and they oriented their smartest people to study what happened after you died, right? They weren't hydrologists and like mathematicians and philosophers like in ancient Greece, right? Ancient Greece, they believe that their smartest people should like study like politics and philosophy, right? That's what they deem to be like the most difficult, the most challenging questions of their time, right? Whereas today it's a little bit different, right? Today in America, I would say it's probably something like the Tony Stark, Elon Musk archetype, where they're building things related to engineered systems. Maybe it's missiles and it's planes, and it's hard manufacturing of engineering, right? Of engineering products and services and blah, 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 right? And maybe being a capitalist, right? Maybe being overly charismatic and creative. But the core point here is that we believe that our inherent individual truths are what is true, right? If we believe it to be true, then it is true, right? And each individual person in our culture is allowed to determine the truth for themselves. You guys know this, right? That's how trans and all these other things can come alive. All of these, kind of distortions of society are able to come alive because of our willingness to reject a consensus truth and to only go inwards to determine what is possible. And this can get a little bit weird because if you are operating as a person and you believe that every action is a result of you, every thought is because of you, right? That's how you get kind of like this, like what people would typically call like a narcissistic type of personality, like a Kanye West, right? And I'm not really big on how people typically use that word, but really, if you want to understand what a narcissist is, it's pretty much just a person who is, or what people try to describe when they're using that word narcissist. I mean, it's a high conviction, high confidence, low reflection, low anxiety person versus like the empath, right? What people call an empath is just the inversion of that. It's high reflection, high anxiety, low conviction, low confidence, right? And obviously, the empath is going to be contributing less to society, right? Because they're just so like cooped up and they're just not able to get ahead, right? Versus the narcissist is going to be kind of stuck, right? So there are some really interesting symptoms to living in a culture like this. And it's actually has to do with one of these things, like one of these things I like to talk about on this channel, and that has to do with the cognitive dissonance associated with something like the S&P 500, right? We are constantly told, "Hey, go invest your money in the S&P 500." And that's just like the go-to financial advice, right? But it's a little bit difficult because a lot of our values as individuals maybe don't overlap with Amazon's values or Apple's values or like just ExxonMobil's values with all of these companies, because I mean, this is just a tiny little bucket of them, 50 of them, right? But Pfizer's in here, Johnson Johnson, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, right? There are all these different companies that are profiting from all of these things that a lot of us don't really agree with, right? And this gets to my really the core point regarding this autonomous culture, that this is the true symptom of an autonomous culture. And it's this idea that if he doesn't do it, then why, if I don't do it, then someone else will. Meaning, if I don't sell these missiles, if I don't, if I'm not running this casino, if I'm not running X, Y, or Z thing, then someone else will. But that's just the opposite of the truth. It's only true if you believe it to be true, right? And the equivalent logic of an eye for an eye makes the world blind, right? If he takes my eye, I get to take his eye. It's the same form of logic with a different, just packaged a little differently. Because that is, like funny enough, like I was talking about this with a girl, and she was like, that's like what girls are trying to describe when they describe toxic masculinity, right? It's this idea that you believe it's okay to do a thing because other people are doing it, or if you don't do it, other people will take advantage of it, right? So like say you work at Raytheon and you literally sit by and sell missiles, like that's what you like manufacture and sell missiles, I mean. Like in your position is, oh well, that inevitably will happen, right? That is exactly what toxic masculinity is, right? And I'm not big on that terminology, but that is what um as a toxic symptom of living in this autonomous culture where we're like so severed from any collective value system that we are, having a hard we're engaged in behaviors and we're justifying certain economic behaviors because hey, if I don't do it, someone else will. And this applies to a lot of things in our economy, not just the industrial military complex, but also like kind of culture, vulture, creativity stuff too. And I think why I'm making this video, because it's really important for you guys to understand how people in our culture like understand truth. Because if you understand that from like a first principles, like a psychological first principles perspective, then you're going to be able to predict how individuals make certain decisions in the marketplace, how certain individuals build their businesses, what services they need, right? The investment decisions they make, right? They're going to do things that fit this narrative, right? They're going to do things that fit this autonomous culture narrative where truth is determined by self. And we'll continue to meditate on how this actually works and why our culture is that way, and how that actually manifests in the markets, because it really does, in later videos. All right. So I hope this was helpful, and we'll pick this up again tomorrow. All right. Let me know what other topics you guys want to see. And yeah, peace and victory.